Bob Wankel covers the Phillies. Crossing Broad did a great job with all the updates yesterday on the Phillies Summer Camp inter-squad game. We'll get some more updates on the Phils. This is Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad. Joins us now, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Happy Friday, Bob. You're on the Happy Hour Friday show. What's up?
What is happening? How are we doing today?
The land of confusion. That's essentially sports at this point, is it not?
Absolutely. It's been weird times down at Citizens Bank Park in recent days. It's just not what you're accustomed to seeing, that's for sure.
I know. I want to ask you, you were there yesterday for the inter-squad game Thursday, and what is it like sitting in the press box with a completely empty ballpark?
So, you've been there a lot. It's usually pretty
not for a live game action, though. I haven't been there when there's a live game action. I get it's an inter-squad, but when you've got live pitching, 9 fielders, I've been there for batting practice, but even then there's like workers and music. I mean, just stiff, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's eerie for sure. I mean, you look across the press box yesterday, and there were 6 or 7 guys in there total. We could hear each other across to the press box. You could hear the players down on the field, which has really kind of been one of the coolest things about the experience. You hear Andrew Knapp telling guys, "Don't give me any crap about balls and strikes." He was calling them yesterday during the scrimmage. You hear Bryce Harper blare out, "Sign him," after JT Realmuto hits the home run on Wednesday, and you can hear a little bit of the personality of the players down on the field, and that's been the one thing that's a lot different about it. But other than that, it's the players chatting on the field, it's the crack of the bat, and then you hear the trucks driving by the stadium, and that's really the only sound you hear right now. It's truly bizarre, that's for sure.
It is weird. I'm looking at the videos that you had posted at Bob Wankel CB, and you can kind of get a glimpse of like what the eeriness in the ballpark. Now, there was a fly ball that someone hit to like deep right field, and it just like the whole place being empty. It just seems so bizarre. So with that, I want to ask you about the pitching in that environment, because a lot of times, the crowd gets on. I mean, did you sense that the pitchers will have a tough time like getting that adrenaline, getting that extra oomph in these kind of situations?
Yeah, I could see that. When it's 0-2 and you got 2 men on, 2 outs, and there's a big pitch coming and guys get jacked up, and I mean, that element of it's going to be completely missing. There's some talk that they're going to try to pump some artificial noise into these stadiums across baseball this season. But, I mean, these players know what's real and what's not, and I don't think that any artificial noise is going to make a difference. I do think that that's going to be something the pitchers have to adjust to. At the same time, you could flip the argument around and say that in a way, sometimes maybe guys get a little bit overamped, they overthrow, they miss their spots because of it. I mean, perhaps this will allow them to be a little bit more even keel and dial in, and the heart rate doesn't get up quite as much. That's the flip side of it. So I guess it remains to be seen how the lack of fans is going to impact the game. But I think across the board, hitters, pitchers in the field, just that eeriness, that quiet nature of the ballpark, I think is going to really be an adjustment for these guys early on.
Is there anything weird going on when after there's an out when it comes to throwing the ball around in the infield?
Yeah, actually a little bit. This has been a discussion. Sometimes the ball gets whipped around and then sometimes it goes right back, So I think a lot of it is just reflex. By rule, I believe that they're not supposed to do that, but we have seen it a couple times where it gets whipped around. But I think as the games actually start, we will not see that. And then in terms of just social distancing and masks and safety measures, certain players are out there right now wearing masks. Others aren't. Rhys Hoskins said he wasn't really sure what he was going to do in terms of wearing a mask, how he would communicate with guys when they reach first base. He said he would try to keep his distance as best as possible, maybe not look at them when he talks to them. JT Realmuto said he probably will not wear a mask in addition to his catcher's mask behind the plate. So I think that is still evolving, and it's really going to be a matter of what makes each player comfortable. So that's a whole different element to this thing that's made it really strange down there.
Yeah, and another thing, Bob, is how like normalcy kind of kicks in once you're back out there, like the high five and the handshakes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you notice that second nature kind of takes over in the middle of competition and there is high fives and handshakes and normalcy?
I've seen some fist bumps. I've seen some elbow taps down there, but I do think for the most part, this is on the mind of these players or on the minds of these players. And, Zach Wheeler talked earlier in the week about what he's going through. His wife is due really right at the start of the season. He wasn't sure if he even wanted to come. He said so far he feels pretty safe. So I think that certain guys are a little bit more comfortable out there than others, but there's enough mindfulness of how other people might feel and the precautions that they're going to take. The guys, I think, are really making a concerted effort to do the right things out there. It definitely does look different. You don't see the high fives. You don't see, the chest pounds and things like that we've seen in years past, and really forever. I think that's definitely a consideration.
You mentioned hearing Bryce Harper say sign him when it comes to JT Realmuto. How do you feel about that? I do think to some extent you let upper management do what they're supposed to do, but I get it at the same time. He wants his teammate to be signed.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a teammate going to bat for a guy. I think that brings the clubhouse together. I think that's good from a unity standpoint. But at the end of the day, this idea that, Bryce Harper wants JT Realmuto to be signed, so that's going to be the end-all, be-all and the thing that drives the deal, I just don't think it's realistic. And I think we may have touched on it last week, but, I've said it. People don't want to hear that the economics of baseball are changing and that they're going to continue to change, but there are some considerations that the Phillies have to think about here. And the bottom line is that baseball took a hit this year. We don't know exactly what next year is going to look like yet. And then beyond 2021, there's going to be a labor dispute. And it looks like a labor dispute that could cause significant disruption to the 2022 season. I know that the DH is in place. But the Phillies have to decide what's the dollar amount. Can JT Realmuto hold up behind the plate until he's 34, 35 years old and give you elite level innings because that's what you're paying for? And the idea that you can just flip him to a DH, I love JT Realmuto. I hope the deal gets done. I think that everyone hopes the deal gets done, but is he going to be an above average designated hitter as a 35-year-old that warrants $23, $25 million a year? It's not that simple. So for all the bros out there that are saying he's the best catcher in baseball, you got to get it done at all costs. There are things that you have to weigh out here. There's only so many guys that you can pay $20 million plus to. That being said, just because the negotiations haven't taken off the way that I think we all would have hoped for them to be at this point, doesn't mean that the deal's not going to get done. I just think that we live in an era where you go on Twitter and you see these reports, and it's easy to have an immediate reaction, and oftentimes it's an overreaction. And, the quotes from Matt Klentak don't sound great. You don't love to hear JT Realmuto say that the negotiations haven't progressed, but that doesn't mean that the deal's not going to get done. It just means that it's a complicated deal, and it may take some time.
Here's a crazy scenario. If they're not going to sign him and they're not really in the race, is it possible to trade him at the deadline to get some value back?
Yeah, I've seen that idea flipped out there. The question I guess I have is, how bad will the Phillies be if they fall out of contention by the August 31 trade deadline? You're talking about 38 calendar days from the start of the season to the trade deadline. So, almost everything would have to go wrong for this team for them to be at the point where they say, okay, we're going to trade JT Realmuto. And then the other consideration, I think, is what's the market going to be? So in a normal year, you would say, well, hey, listen, 2 months of a guy, it could be a real difference maker. Are teams going to be willing to give up as much in terms of compensation for what essentially will amount to 24, 25 games of baseball max? So, that's the other part of it. I doubt that happens, but yeah, when you're looking at a long-term build-out, sure, if you can get young, controllable players as we head into all this labor uncertainty, if the Phillies get off to an abysmal start, is that something that they should look at? Sure, but though I don't think the Phillies are winning the 2020 World Series, I would be stunned if they were in a position where they were clearly out of the race by the end of August.
Bob, you, I think, tweeted a couple of days ago about the pitching and that if they got X amount of starts from Nola and Wheeler, what the rest of the group of guys, I think you said, can they find a way to win like 17 games if those guys win, say 20, 25 games? How do you see the pitching right now kind of shaping up? Is there any indication of, hey, these guys are going to pitch no more than 5 innings. We're going to double up. Nola is going to get paired up with Velasquez, or Wheeler's going to get paired up with Pivetta. Like, is there any insight on the way Girardi may – because it seems that a lot of teams are doing different things about stretching relievers out to 3 innings, maybe using 7 starters, all sorts of wonky stuff out there.
I thought they might consider that. Joe Girardi's indicated, at least at this point, that he intends to go with a 5-man rotation. My sense is that while you won't see guys go 7, 8, 9 innings the first few times through the rotation, that these guys are fairly stretched out, and a lot of them have been on throwing programs that are going to allow them to go, reasonably 5, 6 if they're efficient, possibly into the 7th inning. Aaron Nola was actually asked about that the other day and what his progress is, and where he's at right now. And I think it was Bob Brookover said, well, can you go at least more than 68 pitches, in reference to Gabe Kapler pulling out Aaron Nola in the 2018 opening day start against the Braves. And Nola said, yeah, I would hope so. So to give you a baseline number, I think it's realistic that these guys can give you 70, 80 pitches at the start. I certainly think you'll get that out of Zach Wheeler if he's there. And I think you'll get that at least out of Aaron Nola. And that's really been the biggest development for me this week, is just that Aaron Nola is here. He confirmed he did not have COVID-19. So there really doesn't seem to be any health concerns, at least at the time or for the time being, with Aaron Nola, which is huge. And to your reference to my tweet, the way I look at it is each starter is going to have roughly 12 starts. So let's say Zach Wheeler's wife gives birth. Maybe he misses 2 starts. So you get 22 starts between Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. Can you win? Oh, I don't know. Out of the 22 of them, can you win 15 of them? Can you go 15-7 in those 22 starts? Then it becomes, what do you get out of the other 38 starts, or whatever the number ends up being, to get up to 60? I guess, 38 starts. Can you win another 18 games in there? And that's really going to be the question. And so we'll see what happens. I don't know about this rotation. I think it's good. They have a lot of back-end depth. That's fantastic. If a guy gets sick, if a guy goes down, I think that, Vince Velasquez, Nick Pivetta, Spencer Howard, these guys are all sort of interchangeable in the back end of the rotation, which is good. To me, the key is Jake Arrieta. Can you get 12 good games in a contract year out of Jake Arrieta, who's now finally healthy, should have no excuses, and if he gives you something that resembles the production of a number 3 starter, then all of a sudden I think you have a workable rotation with a really good, deep, and diverse lineup. And then it just comes down to the bullpen. And that's, for me, the thing that I'm having a hard time getting past right now.
Yeah, you brought up Arrieta. I want to get your take on him, because you're right. When Arrieta, contrary to many people's belief, when he has been healthy, he has pitched well here. When he has not been so healthy, he has not pitched so well here. And I think in Philly, we just, we go to the negative, and he stinks because he's always hurt and he stinks. But when he's been healthy, he has had moments that he's pitched well. So what Arrieta have you seen?
It's hard to say right now. We haven't seen him throw live yet. I think that may happen this weekend. So I'll be a little bit more comfortable answering that when I see it. But I will tell you that the first 11 starts he made last year, ERA was sub-4. He was competitive. He didn't go ultra deep into a lot of games, but he was oftentimes 5, 6 innings, 2 runs, and he gave them quite a few respectable starts early on. And if he can replicate that type of performance, then I think that, he's going to be, and they're going to be, in pretty good shape. It's a big if. I know that a lot of people probably aren't too excited to hear that the Phillies rotation is being glued together by a complete question mark who hasn't really been terribly healthy here over the last 2 years. But I have a funny feeling that he looks healthy. Watched a little bit of him throwing out in the bullpen. He looks good to me. I wouldn't be surprised if he gives the Phillies more than what the average fan, thinks is coming. That would be where I'm at with him right now.
We have a segment called Ask Mike and Brode, and someone actually chimed in yesterday that wanted to know what we expected out of Zach Eflin. And I just thought that was so interesting because he kind of flies under the radar. And I thought last year he had good moments and he's throwing complete games, which is something that is pretty rare in today's game of baseball. But then there was that really tough stretch for him last year as well. So what should we expect out of Eflin?
Yeah, he's the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde type pitcher, and it really was in 2018 the same pattern. He was so good at the end of last season, but July and late June was just a complete catastrophe. The way I would answer this, there are a lot of young players on this team that have shown promise over the last 2 seasons, and for whatever reason they've been very inconsistent, or maybe they've fallen a little bit short of expectations. Guys like Scott Kingery, Zach Eflin, Pivetta, Velasquez, a lot of these guys happen to be pitchers. over the last 2 years, and not to make this about Gabe Kapler, but there's been a lot of talk about how the coaching staff failed these young players. Well, now we have a new coaching staff in place. You have Joe Girardi, you have Brian Price. These are highly respected coaches. And to me, it's kind of like, and I understand it's a shortened season, and the way that the thing has progressed here in the last few weeks, it's not ideal in terms of being prepared for a season. But the most fascinating part of the 2020 Phillies to me is, what will these young guys do now that they don't have the security blanket of Gabe Kapler being, targeted and blamed for every single thing that goes wrong. Like, last year the thing was that Zach Eflin was being forced to pitch at the top of the strike zone. And sure, his K per 9 went up, great. But that also led to a lot of hard contact at times. And he wasn't comfortable with doing it. He didn't buy in. So now, in theory, he should be comfortable. He should be healthy. He should be buying into what's being told to him by the staff. So it's kind of like put up or shut up. What is Zach Eflin? Is he a guy that can be a legitimate number 3 starter in a rotation? Certainly doesn't have that elite level ceiling, but can he be a really good major league starter for a number of years? Or is he a fringe long man number 5 type? And I think that that's a question that needs to be answered. I don't know if we're going to get that answer definitively in 10 to 12 starts. But to me, the jury is still out on him. I think he has it in him to stick. But again, I'd be lying if I said with any absolute conviction that, oh, yeah, watch this, he's headed for a breakout year.
Well, it is interesting that you brought up the whole throwing on the high of the strike zone, because I remember the whole conversation of him not listening to Chris Young, and that's kind of when he went back into when he was playing well. So I guess, is Price that much of a difference maker, or could he possibly be that much of a difference maker when it comes to teaching these pitchers?
Yeah, this may be a little bit unfair, but I will tell you, I've heard this, and I've sort of observed this myself. I think last year, at least with the pitching staff, there was a sense that not only were the pitchers not buying into what was being coached, but I don't think that there were a ton of answers. Like, when things went wrong, I don't know that the mechanical tweaks were being made. I don't know if I just don't know if there was a breakdown between Chris Young and the pitching staff, but it just seemed like they weren't buying into the fixes. They weren't buying into the suggestions. I've looked closely this past week, and it seems like that there's a lot of communication on the field between Brian Price, between the pitchers. It seems like a lot of positive body language. And I mean, this is just me sitting in the press box trying to dial in and kind of guess at what I'm looking at. But I see a lot of head nods, a lot of like positive body language in response to what's being told in between pitches and during these sessions. So, yeah, I think that sometimes, even if it's not a tangible lesson, it's just buying in. Like, I trust this guy. I trust what's being told to me. And the trust alone and the buy-in alone sometimes is what can net that positive result.
All right, we're talking some Phillies with Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad. A couple more real quick. Alec Bohm, I mean, I know a lot of people think that he's probably, they might for the service time, but seems like they are going to have a really tough decision to make here. I mean, you're seeing him get some live at-bats. What are you seeing from this, what was he, the number 3 overall pick in the draft?
Yeah, he doubled on Wednesday. He singled the opposite field yesterday. He looks good. I mean, there's no doubt if the Phillies are going to carry 16 pitchers in this initial 30-man roster to open the season, that means there's 14 position players. To me, is Alec Bohm one of the 14 best position players / hitters the Phillies have right now? Yes. I don't foresee him starting, though. Again, we don't really know what the deal is with Scott Kingery at this point. Is he going to be ready for opening day? We still don't know the answer to that question. But to me, Alec Bohm should be on this team opening day. I think that he will be a factor, whether it be at third base or getting some swings as a DH or possibly even playing some first. He's looked good. He's opened some eyes. I'm not telling you that he's going to be the rookie of the year, but I do believe there's a place for him on this team, and I believe that he's going to get at-bats in critical spots for them.
All right. If Bob Wankel's writing the lineup card, does Roman Quinn have to be in it?
Yes, emphatically yes. He's been the guy for me. You can look at Bryce Harper and say, oh, wow, yeah, he looks good, or JT Realmuto, and obviously, of course they do. But Roman Quinn's the one guy that's really opening eyes out there right now. He's been all over the place. He's hit the ball with authority. He just brings a completely different dynamic to that lineup. I call him a spark plug type of player. I don't want to oversell him, and I don't want to get carried away with this comparison, but I see a little bit of Shane Victorino and the dynamic and elements that he brought to the Phillies lineups, when they went on their run. And the question obviously is can he stay on the field for 20 straight days? And he hasn't been able to this point in his career. But to me, no fault of Adam Hazley's. I just think that Roman Quinn is the better player right now. And if it were me, I'd be writing him into the lineup opening day.
All right. Now you got us all excited. Thanks a lot. All right, Bob.
Roman Quinn is Shane Victor.
Stay safe up there. It's a very odd situation, obviously. When the Phillies continuing their workouts, and next week, I guess they'll start some of the, was that 2 weeks? They're going to start those 3 scrimmage games?
Yeah, I believe it's the 18th, 19th, and 20th. So it's the beginning of the week, and then they take a few days in between that last exhibition game, and then they get going for real on the 24th.
All right. Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad. He does a great job covering the team at Bob Wankel CB, and he, like all guests, joined us via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, Bob.
Hey, thanks, guys.